Hey everyone, it's Aaron. This is just going to be a quick guide on all the grammar you need to know for the digital SAT. First thing is I'm giving you a new, easier definition of verb to avoid getting tricked by questions. It's just going to be the word that changes spelling to match subject or tense. So I have these three examples here. I have been considering going to learn ice skating. Everything in this sentence pretty much looks like it describes an action of some kind, but it's always going to be the first word, the one that actually changes spelling. I have been considering going to learn ice skating. I had been considering going to learn ice skating. She has been considering going. You get the idea. So if there's any sort of verb, no verb, or conjugation or SVA question, it'll always be the first one. Next thing is verb confusion. There are two categories here. Words that look like verbs that are not actually verbs that they can use to trick you into making run-ons or fragments. ING, never a verb. When I say a verb, I mean you can use this to make a sentence. Like, I eating cake, not a sentence. Same with 2 plus verb. I to eat cake is not a sentence. So these are not verbs for our purposes. Next group is the ones that don't look like verbs but are verbs. These are in 3 groups. To be, which is all of these, and you can see James is eating cake. If we go back to my original rule, it's always going to be the first word. You can see, okay, is the verb here, not eating. There's also to have, which is these, and then what are called the modal verbs, which are these ones. You know all these words already. It's not like this is hard information. You just need to be able to quickly access it when you're scanning a passage for where the verbs are. Tense is only past, present, future, and it only comes from the verb. I have eaten already. Have is present tense. Like, I have glasses that for some reason I'm not wearing right now. So this sentence is present tense. Bob was running to the store, past tense. This matters if you have to match tense within a passage. A clause is a group of words that has a subject and verb. There's 2 types of clauses. Independent clause has a subject verb, works as a sentence. It could be as many words or as few words as you want. I ate. That's a clause. It's an independent clause. It works as a sentence. I ate a tasty chocolate cake for my birthday last week. Also an independent clause. How do I know this is just one big clause? Because there's no other verb anywhere in this part. You can basically count the verbs to know how many clauses there are. Dependent clause has subject verb but does not work as a sentence. I ate. This is still the independent clause. Because I was hungry. The because I was hungry does not work as a sentence on its own. Bob, who was hungry, ate. The bolded part in both of these examples is the dependent clause. Who was hungry, the subject is who, the verb is was. And was, if you remember, is one of the verb confusion options. So I can pretty quickly scan this sentence and then see 8 was. 2 verbs, 2 clauses. You're going to need to be able to do this to read passages for grammar questions. Let's talk about how to make dependent clauses. All you need to know for the DSAT is subordinating conjunction. You start with an independent clause, then you put some word before the independent clause that makes the entire thing no longer work as a sentence. So in this example, I ate. That's an independent clause. It works on its own as a sentence. But if I put the word after I ate, this whole thing no longer works as a sentence on its own. We would need a second part, like after I ate, I slept. This would be the independent clause. This would be the dependent clause. There's another trick for this with word order. The subordinating conjunction has to be the first word of its dependent clause. And I usually tell students, there's more than 50 of these words in English. It's not about memorizing them all. It's just about noticing word order. If you can find a verb, then you can connect back to a subordinating conjunction. Moving on to how to combine parts. There's really only 2 things that can happen. This is a lot of stuff, but these are just different options within those possibilities. Either you have the independent clause first, like these examples. I ate after you arrived. This is independent clause, I ate, and then after you arrived is a dependent clause. The word after is the subordinating conjunction. Or you could have independent clause plus phrase, I ate after the party. You do not need any punctuation to combine these. I put a plus as just my way of saying, okay, no punctuation. The reason why you don't need any punctuation is the word after is telling you that there's going to be a second part. You don't get that luxury if you switch the order and the independent clause comes second. After you arrived, comma, I ate. I need this comma here to avoid confusion. Let me give a simpler example for why you need this comma. Let's say I have 2 parts. I ate and Bob slept. If I wanted to combine these and I put the dependent clause first, after I ate, Bob slept, we can only read one word at a time. So, after I ate Bob. There is a split second if you try to combine these where it looks like you're saying after I ate Bob, which is obviously not true. So to avoid this confusion, we put a comma here. And then it's like, okay, we know a new clause is starting. We know Bob is not the thing that you ate. That's why you need a comma if you have dependent clause first or phrase first. Either way, you avoid that confusion. If you have independent clause and then another independent clause, it's the same situation as the middle one. You just need some punctuation to tell us that, okay, a new clause is starting, because we don't have the power of the subordinating conjunction to act like a flag, to be like, new part coming. CC stands for coordinating conjunction. You probably learned about these already in school at some point. These are the fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet. So this is kind of misleading because this isn't even all of them, and the SAT isn't going to use all of these anyway. You pretty much just need and, or, but. Maybe so. I think if you just remember the fanboys, you'll be fine. Let's move on to comma splice. This is what happens when you mess up combining parts. In particular, you can't separate a subject and verb with just one comma. Bob, comma, ate cake. This is wrong. There's no way that you can have this ever be correct. And so what happens is sometimes the digital SAT will write a sentence that tries to distract you from this comma, or the comma won't even be part of the underline so that you miss it. But just remember, you can never separate subject and verb with just one comma. To fix this, you either remove the comma or you add another comma to make it so that the two commas are working together like big parentheses. Bob, comma, my friend from New York, comma, ate cake. It's equivalent to using parentheses here in these two positions. So we no longer have that issue of separating the subject and verb with just one comma. That's comma splice. Fragment is you have a sentence that doesn't have an independent clause at all, because every sentence that's correct needs to have at least one independent clause. The other option is that it's just somehow improperly constructed. Only dependent clause, because we were hungry. This is a fragment. No verb. Bob going to the store. Remember, ing is not a verb. You can't use this to make a sentence. Comma splice, Bob, comma, a cake. That is a type of fragment also. Those are the fragment types. Run-on is the opposite of fragment. This is where you have too many independent clauses that are improperly combined. You could have no comma, which I already talked about. You need the comma to serve as a flag. I ate and Bob slept is wrong. If you go back up to the chart, you can see this is comma coordinating conjunction to correctly combine these. No conjunction, I ate, comma, Bob slept is also wrong because this is implying that the first one is a dependent clause, which it's not. Or you could just have missing everything. I ate, Bob slept. This is pretty nonsensical, and I don't think the DSAT would do this very often. That's run-on. Next thing is nouns as modifiers. A modifier is just when any word or group of words describes another word or a group of words. In this case, just like adjective. You can have a noun that works like an adjective. So if you compare these sentences, you'll see what I mean. I met Bob, comma, the chef, comma, for dinner. This is just a normal noun here. Or I met Chef Bob for dinner. In the second one, the word chef is a noun still, but it's working like an adjective to describe Bob. This seems like a stupid thing for me to put an entire section for, but it's actually a very common trick on the DSAT. Let me go to the no punctuation archetype for parenthetical. If you look at this actual question from an official DSAT packet, they do this thing. Critic Stina Chin. She is a critic. It's the same as Chef Bob. So you actually want to have no comma here. So that leaves you with C. You can't do A or B because of this initial comma. And then D is wrong because you can never separate the subject and verb with just one comma. So that would be the comma splice. So you have to go with C for this one. Let's move on to subject confusion. When I say subject confusion, I just mean not knowing which word in the sentence is the actual subject. A subject can never be inside of a phrase. The cat in the box was cute. Obviously, the thing that was cute here is the cat. It's not the box. In the box is just a phrase that's giving extra information about where the cat was. This is a really stupid, simple example, but they do use this to try to trick you sometimes. The other version of this is possessive. A possessive is, for the purposes of the DSAT, never going to be a noun. It's just a weird, fancy adjective. Bob's cat was cute. Bob's is an adjective, giving us extra information about the cat. So the subject is cat. If you read the sentence, you would never think that Bob was cute. So you can just use your common sense for this one. I'm moving on to IVS. IVS stands for inverted verb structure. This comes from the principle of subject confusion. A subject can never be inside of a phrase. So if you start with a phrase, then it can't have the subject inside of it. In the fridge are 2 bottles. This is a weird sentence, but it is grammatically correct. You can start with the phrase here, but then the subject can't be fridge because fridge is inside this phrase. The phrase is the pink part. The subject is bottles. It's not 2 because 2 is an adjective saying how many bottles. And then the verb is are, and are is one of the verb confusion verbs. If you're trying to match subject and verb, you might be tempted to say fridge is because fridge is singular. But but fridge is not the subject. Bottles is the subject. You can also do this with adverbs that describe position. There are 2 bottles. There is 1 bottle. Bottle is the subject in both of these cases. There's just an adverb. It's not even a noun, so it definitely cannot be the subject. Another phrase and noun issue that the DSAT tests pretty often is dangling modifier. It's actually very simple. If you have a phrase that's trying to describe a noun, it has to actually describe the closest noun. So the X version is wrong. Walking in the forest, the trees seemed pretty to Bob. Or even just walking in the forest, the trees seemed pretty, period. Those are both wrong because you have this ing word, walking. It has to describe a noun that is walking. So it can't be trees because trees are not walking. The way you fix this is just by moving the noun that we're talking about as close to the phrase as possible. Walking in the forest, Bob thought the trees were pretty. So if you get a dangling modifier question, you pretty much only have to read the first noun of the question choice. Here's my ing, recovering 2 years later. Only a person can recover in this context. If you look, I highlighted the first noun of each answer choice. Henry, rain, because apostrophe s is not a noun. It's just an adjective, or it. The only option that can recover is Henry, which is a person. If you get a dangling modifier question, that's kind of easy because you don't have to read the whole answer choice. This is the last thing. This shows up more often than it should because it's kind of a stupid idea. But if you have a list of things and an individual item in a list has a comma, it would be really confusing to tell where the end and beginning of each list item is. To avoid that confusion, you use semicolons. Let me give you an example because I think it'll make more sense. Let's say I've been to Los Angeles, California. That's just one place. It's not 2 places. But if I have a list of places I've been to and I separate them all with commas, it could potentially look like it's 2 places. This bottom version here fixes that. Los Angeles, California, semicolon. Paris, France, semicolon. That's just a way of saying we've only been to 3 places, but each place has a comma inside of it. You would technically still use a semicolon for all items, even if only one item has a comma. Here's an example of that. I've met Bob, who plays soccer, and then James and Sally. James and Sally do not have commas, but that doesn't matter. We're still going to use semicolons for all of the parts. And that is everything you need to know for grammar for the DSAT. Next time, I will cover the actual archetypes and strategies for solving them, but this is just the DSAT grammar notes, which I can also provide the link to. Okay, thanks everyone.